I want to acknowledge the OCLC Research Library Partnership, which both underwrites and inspires our work. Attendees from this webinar are from the OCLC RLP, and we want to thank you for your continued support and input into our work. These are both crucial to our success. So I am thrilled to welcome our colleagues, my colleagues from OCLC Research today, and I'm going to turn things over to Chayla Weber, who will kick things off for us. So take it away, Chayla.
Thanks, Marilee. And welcome, everyone. I'm so glad that you could join us today. My name is Chayla Scott Weber. I am a Senior Program Officer with the Research Library Partnership here at OCLC. And as some of you may have heard me say before, OCLC Research has a long history of work in the area of archive, special, and distinctive collections. And we work in special collections because we understand them to be an important site of knowledge creation, made possible by the library's commitment to the stewardship of their distinctive collections. We also understand that the unique nature of material in special collections can make scaling a challenge. And we work to identify areas of common need and patterns of innovation to help libraries scale learning and expertise with these collections. Today, I'll be sharing some ongoing work that really engages some of those challenges of scale. The Building a National Archival Finding Aid Network project, also known by its acronym NAFAN. It's a project led by the California Digital Library, funded by IMLS, and done in collaboration with all of the partners that you see on this slide. The Shift Collection, University of Virginia Libraries, the Chambridge Group, and of course, OCLC. I'll be presenting with several of my colleagues from OCLC Research today. I'll start by giving you a project overview, and then my colleague Lynn will talk to you about some of the research design process. And then Leslie will be talking to you about what we've been learning about archival aggregation users. And then Bruce will talk to us about finding aid data research and the research questions and methods. And then we'll have some time for questions at the end. So what is NAFAN? NAFAN, as I said, is a project led by the California Digital Library and supported by IMLS through their National Leadership in Libraries grant program. And this is a 2-year project running from September 2020 through August 2022. For a bit of background, there are 15 extant archival aggregators in the US, which share similar characteristics within a given state or region. They are ingesting and providing persistent hosting of finding aids. In some cases, they are the primary finding aid interface for their contributors. There are also 3 meta aggregators, which we define as programs that harvest and index finding aid data from aggregators and individual institutions. They're the History of Medicine Finding Aid Consortium, the Social Networks and Archival Context Program, or SNAC, and of course our own Archives Grid. But as you see in this slide, there is not comprehensive coverage for discovery of archival collections nationally. So CDL maintains the Online Archive of California, or OAC, which brings together finding aids from across that state. They have been reevaluating the scope and sustainability of OAC and believed it was a timely opportunity to convene a broader conversation with other aggregators to explore a more shared infrastructure and service model. In late 2018, CDL received 1 year of LSTA funding from the California State Library to initially explore with other regional and statewide finding aid aggregators the idea of a national finding aid network. Findings from that grant indicated that this was an idea worth pursuing, which led to this current phase of work. So one of the major pieces of the vision of this project is to create a truly national aggregation service, bringing together collections from a wide variety of archives across the country in museums, academic libraries, public libraries, historical societies, community archives. This is a 2-year research and development phase. It builds directly on the prior work from the 2018 planning phase grant. And so over the next 2 years, we want to explore and create the blueprint for implementing a national finding aid network that is community driven, community sustained, and community governed. And the project has 4 activity streams with work happening in parallel across all 4 areas. Research with both archival practitioners and end users, technical assessment and prototyping, community engagement, and sustainability and governance planning. And OCLC staff will be contributing to other activity streams, but our primary role is to take the lead on conducting research. And so that's what we're going to be talking to you about today. And while the 4 of us are the people presenting today in the webinar, the OCLC research team that's working on NAFAN it includes many people whose names you see here on this slide. And it really is a very fun and collaborative team effort with everybody bringing unique and important skills to the project. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Lynn to talk about the research design process.
Thank you so much, Shayla, and hello, everyone. It's great to be here with you. And so next slide, please. So we did a mixed methods approach. And so we used both qualitative and quantitative data collection, and we will be using both qualitative and quantitative data analysis tools. And the qualitative research is to identify the needs of both researchers or users of aggregations and cultural heritage institutions regarding finding aid aggregation. On the quantitative side, we are evaluating the quality of existing finding aid data. And Bruce will talk about this later. Next slide, please. And so we have, as I said, we're looking at researchers or the users, as we've been calling them throughout the project. And we looked at the literature and the work that has been done on personas. And by that, we determined that there were 3 main avenues for us to explore, and also 3 sources of data that we wanted to examine. And you see them on this slide. And so we have the users or researchers, the cultural heritage institutions, and the aggregated finding aid data. And today we'll walk through each of these with you. We'll identify the research questions they address, and again, how we'll be collecting and analyzing the data. Next slide, please. So with the research design, we have, first of all, we did a pop-up research or survey, which Leslie will talk to you about today. And we had a great response. And the survey was available on aggregator sites. And so this survey would pop up and some individuals would take them. And then from that set of responses, we asked if individuals or the users, the researchers, were interested in an individual interview with us to talk about how they use these aggregators. And so we will be interviewing 25 individuals based on those responses, those who responded to these pop-up surveys. And then with the cultural heritage institutions, we looked at the individuals who work in these institutions. So these are librarians, archivists, and museum staff. And we conducted 10 focus group interviews with these individuals. And then we have the finding aid data analysis that is an overview and a look into these aggregator sites. Next slide, please. So the research questions for the cultural heritage institutions are on the screen. And so basically we are asking the enabling and constraining factors that influence whether and how institutions describe their archival collections. We also asked what are the enabling or constraining factors that influence whether institutions decide to contribute to an aggregation. And then in the cultural heritage institution staff, what value they perceive in participating in an aggregation service, and what value does this bring to their institutions, meaning this includes also their researchers, users. Next screen, please. As I said, we conducted 10 focus group interviews with 5 to 6 participants each. And we recruited via email lists and Twitter. We had 274 respondents to our screening survey. We organized the groups based on institution size, job responsibility, years experience, participation in aggregation. And we conducted the focus group interviews. They were recorded and then transcribed. And now we are in the process of analyzing these data and developing a code book. And these were all conducted virtually in June 2021. Next slide, please. We were very lucky to have a very involved and knowledgeable research advisory group. So the individuals listed on this slide were invited to participate in the research advisory group for this portion, this phase of the research for this project. And you can see by the names and their affiliations of the types of individuals we have, and they have been absolutely marvelous in helping us look at some of the data that we collected and to interpret the results. They've also had a lot of input on the questions we're asking and helping us to really make this project much more worthwhile for the community. And so now I will turn it over to Leslie.
Hello, good morning and good afternoon. I am based in the DC area, so it's afternoon for me. My name is Leslie Lenga, and I am the Associate Research Scientist working in the Library Trends and User Research Office with under the direction of Lynn Conaway. But I've been working on this NAFAN project for about a year, and so I'm really excited to be putting out some of these findings as we go through understanding who the users are. As Lynn said, this is just one piece of the user research that we've got now. These are the findings from the pop-up survey. This covers kind of a lot of territory. We didn't really have a lot of understanding about the breadth of the population of people who come to these websites and also what they're doing there when they come. So in order to capture that information, to get a really well-rounded picture, we've asked about different demographic characteristics, but we've also asked them about their search behavior. This also will help inform who we're selecting for individual interviews. And I'll talk a little bit about the sort of that method that we've been developing for that piece of the project as well. Next slide. So when I said we were talking about characteristics, this is the first one that I wanted to show you. This is a bar chart that is ranked by the most populous group of people to the smallest group of people in our respondent pool. They've got about 15 professions there that people could self-identify as. And at the top there, you see 20.8% are, they consider themselves to be retired, so no longer working. But the next most common group that we have by profession are archivists and librarians at 13.5. Really interestingly, we have some really well-known people who come to archives who are also within this group. Graduate students, faculty are up there in the top 5 of this distribution. But we also have some strong showings from others like genealogists, undergraduate students. In this particular case, professional at 6.5% covers a lot of folks who fall into different professions, such as like people from the trades or lawyers, maybe nurses, or people like urban planners and others. Next slide. Here is a bar chart that shows the distribution by age of our respondent pool. This is not ranked by most populace, but though you might think so. The largest proportion of our users are 65 and older. That's not totally surprising considering the chart before that has a lot of people saying that they are retired. The next most populous group we have are the 55 to 64-year-olds, and then 45 to 54-year-olds, and all the way down. There aren't going to be people too much on the very bottom of this distribution because we did cut off the age of eligibility at 18 years old and older. So the people who are older than 18 are really where we're going to start to see others, respondents coming into this survey. Next slide. So here we get into more of the context around why you are at the archival aggregation website. I want to just point out that this was a select all that apply question. So therefore, you're not going to see percentages that sum to 100%. There are, it seems like 5 that are pretty common though, that people probably selected in combination with each other. Though that's not necessarily the way that people answered this question. They could have selected all of them. They could have selected one. It really just sort of depends on what they were there for. What you can see though is that personal interest is a pretty big, strong driver of why people are coming to these sites and what they're looking for. That makes up the 32.7% of respondents. But those next 4 are pretty strong as well, all around 20%. Family history research is 24.4%. Professional projects make up 22.8%. Long-term projects, things that take months or years to complete, are 20%, and local history research are 19.3%. Just to clarify as well, professional projects are typically work or projects that are done in the course of the person's everyday job. So things that they might be doing for work. Next slide, please. And then the last characteristic I wanted to show you today is how users are finding these archival aggregator websites. We were not totally surprised, but there is not a lot of evidence of this to say that people are coming to these archival aggregation websites through open browser search. We do know that some other aggregators, when they look at their Google Analytics for their individual site, know some of this, but it hadn't necessarily been seen across all of the archival aggregators. So this is kind of confirmation, I think, of that. You do see, though, that there are strong percentages of people who followed a link on the website or social media. Archival aggregators are sometimes linked off of academic library pages or things of that nature. So that's interesting that people are following trusted sources. And then there's a fair number of people, 20.3%, who said that they'd used the site before. Next slide. So as was mentioned earlier, we are trying to develop some personas off of this. We have previous research done in service of new platform build outs in the archival space that took a more qualitative approach to understanding who the users are who would be coming to the website and using it so as to basically address their user needs. These come from the ArcLight project at Stanford. Rockefeller Archives did one. We also have some persona types for archive space. So if you're familiar with any of those projects, you might know that none of those are archival aggregation. So this is an opportunity to add something, I think, to that body of literature that's growing. The other thing that we're able to do with the plethora of data that we got from the pop-up survey is to provide a quantitative approach to understanding and grouping these types of users, not only by education or profession or what they're searching for, but kind of a combination of those things. So we used a two-step cluster analysis that allowed us to see mathematically how folks are more similar together within different clusters. And then the clusters are mathematically separated from each other by how far apart they're distinct. So it's a kind of interesting method to do so. It's something pretty commonly used in like market research or something of that nature, where you're trying to really understand the characteristics and the people who were within a large body of data. And you're trying to figure out how you would target them to provide services. Our cluster analysis revealed 5 different clusters, which works out very well for us, though that was not that was not by design. That's just how it sort of came out. And we had intended to do 25 interviews, which means that we're able to pick 5 of from each cluster to provide interviews in 25. So that's 5 times 5. We are just getting that underway right now and making some of those invitations to the people who said they would be willing. And next slide. So those previous persona projects had come to some similarity about how they understood the users. This is how we were sort of operating. This is what we thought were the similar groupings across different persona projects before. Next slide. And this is our cluster analysis output. So this is how the NAFAN users, based on the survey data, shook out, which is really interesting. There's some pretty good overlap between what we saw from previous projects. So that's heartening, and that's good to know that we're making some good confirmation of the research that's been done before. We do see, though, that there are distinct categories for family history and personal interest. And those are sort of interesting, but they come more to the fore, I think perhaps because it's just a possibility, because we're dealing with folks who are doing research on the open web, who are coming to these websites from a browser search. So now I'm going to turn it over to Bruce.
Okay, great. Thanks, Leslie. I'm Bruce Washburn from OCLC Research. We've bounced back to the West Coast, where I am, West Coast of the US. Finding aid data research questions and methods. I'm going to be looking at the quantitative data analysis work that's focused on the finding aid data. So in research, we're carrying out this quantitative data analysis with a representative sample of finding aids from the NAFAN project participants. And we're investigating the structure and the content and the consistency of finding aid data as we prepare to be ready to evaluate questions and needs that are identified in the user research phase of the study that Lynn and Leslie discussed. There was an EAD tag analysis study that OCLC carried out in 2013, and we worked with a different aggregation of EAD documents than the one we have now. It was based on about 120,000 finding aids drawn from OCLC's ArchiveGrid discovery system. And that analysis looked at EAD tag and attribute usage from a discovery perspective. We were identifying, we identified these 5 high-level features that are often present in discovery systems. Like searching by keywords or by specific fields, that's a common discovery feature, as is the ability to browse across documents by facets of various kinds. And the content of search result displays, that's in the critical path of discovery. The display elements will help researchers disambiguate and select relevant resources. And some data elements could be used to sort or narrow a search result. Next slide, please. Thanks. The EAD tag analysis, we use that discovery framework of high-level discovery features to select EAD elements and attributes that, if present, could be accessed, indexed, and displayed. And this is the categorization of EAD elements and attributes that the study found to be relevant for supporting discovery system features. For example, dates could potentially be search terms and the basis for browsing or sorting. and important for disambiguating similarly named collections and displays. Or material types represented by form and genre terms. Those could be important for narrowing a large result using a facet. So the question then was, how often are these used? That 2013 study developed these usage thresholds. They're meant to evaluate the EAD aggregation and give us a sense of the presence of elements, attributes, and their values at different thresholds to see how much coverage there would be in the corpus of data. So we reuse these for the NAFAN data analysis, even though we recognize that these cutoff points and thresholds are a somewhat arbitrary approach. Here's a color-coded table that compares the usage thresholds from the 2013 study, the column on the right, with the same tag analysis applied to the NAFAN data corpus in 2021. You might notice there are some elements that we have added for analysis in the 2021 study. And so those lack an entry in the 2013 column. This is thanks to input from the NAFAN project team and the advisory board on additional EAD elements of interest. So you can see how this NAFAN input has helped to breathe some new life into that older research. The findings of the earlier study in 2013 were pretty mixed. Some important elements were at the high or complete thresholds, but many elements that we found should be important for discovery interfaces were at medium or low use. And though the NAFAN EAD aggregation is a different corpus of data provided by different contributing institutions at a different time, the tag analysis for it hasn't changed dramatically. Some elements have moved from the high threshold to complete and some from medium to high. So it's headed in the right direction. But we found that use of content tags in the EAD origination and in ArcDesk control access elements, which had not been evaluated in the 2013 study, were mostly getting closer to medium or high level usage. Apart from that, the 2013 study's appraisal of how well EAD supports the typical features of discovery systems could be viewed as mostly unchanged. This might be due in part to the static nature of some finding aids. Once they're written and published, some EAD documents might not receive any further updates or improvements. And in an evaluation of finding aid data processing dates from one of the NAFAN participants, we noted that 2/3 had not been updated in the last 5 years, and 1/3 hadn't been updated since the time of this 2013 study. So given that, maybe it's not too surprising that the analysis results for a similar set of data would not show dramatic shifts. Though replicating the 2013 tag analysis was an important step to confirm what we previously understood about the content and character of EAD finding aids, it only scratched the surface of what's left to learn. So while OCLC's qualitative research is still being carried out, we can pursue other quantitative research now to learn more about the NAFAN finding aid aggregation. So here are some of the areas that we're investigating. We want to look at the linking potential of the NAFAN EAD finding aids, and also the completeness and the consistency of the description of the collection's physical characteristics and genre. We wondered, are content elements associated with controlled vocabularies, or can they be? And is institutional contact information in EAD finding aids consistent and reliable? Finally, how do EAD finding aids inform researchers about access to, use of, and reuse of materials in the described collections? We have preliminary results for 2 of these studies that I can share with you now. A first step in analyzing links was to extract the link URLs from the EAD elements and attributes that are designed for connecting to external resources, and those EAD elements are shown here. We focused on external links, that is, URLs that led to a digital resource somewhere on the web, rather than links within the same EAD document. Those external resources could belong to the same institution that created the finding aid. This graph shows the average number of external links per finding aid for each NAFAN partner, ranging from a high of 9 links per finding aid to a partner that did not make use of external links. Those counts are represented by the blue bar in the chart, while the orange bar represents the average number of links per finding aid after deduplicating the links. For some institutions, even after deduplicating their links, the average number of per finding aid, it doesn't drop very much. But for other institutions, it drops quite a bit, suggesting that in the latter case, the same external resources are linked to from many or most of their finding aids, while in the former case, the range of linked resources is more varied, if not richer. We also tested the viability of external links. The decay of link quality, that's a common issue on the web, and the issue tends to correlate with the amount of time that has passed since the document was last updated. For example, a recent study of external links in New York Times articles from between 1996 and 2019 found that 25% of the links were inaccessible. Since a fair amount of the NAFAN EAD document corpus may not have been updated in several years, we wondered whether we would find a similar reduction in their link accessibility occurring over time. We found over 600,000 unique external links in the NAFAN data, and we've tested a 25% sample of those links. And overall, link quality is much better than what we might have expected, given what was reported in other studies for web link quality in general. And for most NAFAN partners, the link quality is excellent, though we do not have conclusive evidence yet to support this correlation being a cause. It may be that the use of persistent identifiers and URLs is a more consistently followed practice in library and archives data, and therefore has avoided some of the decay in quality that we see elsewhere on the web. For example, one NAFAN contributor used persistent URLs from at least 5 different URL providers for around half of their external links. We also examined the responses for the external links that we successfully tested, and the resulting percentages of media types ends up being somewhat misleading. We can't tell yet by how much. There likely are many links to HTML resources from finding aids, but the 79% here, it's too high if we consider the user experience of some of those resources. For many of the HTML resources, the web page is used to provide a framework for presenting the core content, which might be an image or streaming media or an embedded PDF document. So a more in-depth review of the HTML resources would be needed to derive a more accurate assessment. The second study that we have some findings for is an examination of the physical characteristics and genre data in the finding aids. The OCLC Research pop-up survey revealed an interest in a broad range of materials, including some materials that may not be expected to be commonly included in the types of archival collections described by finding aids: periodicals, newspapers, other published content. So what can EAD documents tell us about the form and genre of the materials in their associated collections? The NAFAN data dashboard shows that the genre form element for genre or physical characteristics is used within the ArcDesk controlled access area. That's where controlled access terms are expected to be representative of all or most of the collection. And that analysis indicates that at least one genre form term is present in this upper level for about 38% of the NAFAN finding aids. But the presence of genre form terms that varies considerably across the range of NAFAN participant aggregations, with some making little use of the element directly, while several participants include it in 50% or many more of their finding aids. After normalizing and clustering the genre form element values, there were more than 5,300 distinct terms, which seems somewhat high for an element that might be expected to draw from a more limited range of values, maybe from controlled vocabularies. We did find that a wide range of controlled vocabularies, including some local ones, were used as sources, which would expand the set of distinct terms. While the number of distinct values is high, their occurrence counts reflects a very long tail, with 84% of the distinct terms used in fewer than 10 different EAD documents. This chart represents the other end of that scale. It includes the 228 genre form terms that were found in 100 or more different EAD documents. So these results, as I noted before, they're preliminary. And as this data analysis work is completed, we'll be reviewing, documenting, and sharing this information widely for others to evaluate as well. So thanks for the opportunity to go over these updates. And if there are questions that I've missed in the chat, we can take those now. Thanks.
Thank you so much to everyone, and apologies, we had a bit of a SharePoint mishap, which I think many of you can probably relate to. We had a couple of different versions of our slide deck in SharePoint. So apologies for that, and sorry for the ruffled feathers for my colleagues. Let's see. So I think we've only had one question so far, and I'm gonna try to find that. But in the meantime, would also invite people to put your questions into chat. Be sure that the option is set to everyone. If there have been anything that is set to all attendees, unfortunately, the panelists can't see things that are marked for all attendees. So you're going to have to retype those or copy and paste them into the chat. So we did have one question about the pop-up survey. So for Leslie, any clue as to whether the retirees were volunteering at cultural institutions? And I don't believe that the pop-up survey would allow us to see that level of detail, but you're the expert, Leslie, so I'm going to put that question to you.
Yeah, thanks for that question. I saw that one come through. So we can probably look a little bit closer at whether or not people volunteered. That information about them being at cultural heritage institutions or whether or not they associate with them, especially those who said they would be interested in a one-on-one interview, provided us with a little bit of more information about themselves, including perhaps if they work for an institution, a cultural heritage institution in particular. But we haven't looked at that more deeply to see whether or not those retirees are associated with that. I can tell you that when we looked for individuals to invite for the interviews and looking across the different clusters and specifically people who are classified as retired by profession, I did not see that pop up that often. Or I guess maybe not at all. Nothing's coming to mind right now. So I'm not sure that that is findable or that those people will be there. I think Karen also inserted that she would consider herself more of a lifelong learner. And I wanted to clarify that when we got the results back, we were able to go through the answers that were handwritten in for other under profession, and we recoded those back into the file so that we had a better sense of how people describe themselves. And we were very careful to include people who specified that they are retired but might have been academic faculty somewhere or something of that kind as retired, so that we had a full sense of that. There are people in the lifelong learning profession who specifically did not provide information or said that they are unemployed. So there's a little bit of a difference between the definitional change between those two.
Thank you. And thank you for pulling Karen's question into that. Here is a question from Artie to Bruce. Were there differences based on the EAD schema format, EAD 2002, EAD 3, etc.?
Well, there weren't because we didn't have any EAD 3 data from the project participants. That would have complicated, it will complicate these types of analyses of the data when there's a shift from EAD 2002 to EAD 3. Within EAD 2002 data, there were differences in how to validate the documents, some validated against the DTD and some against schema. And there's a lot of variation, creativity, and well, the patterns that you find in the EAD 2002 data for trying to isolate the field elements and attribute values that we're interested in for this study, those have posed for me some challenges of trying to make sure that we recall from the data all of the data that we're looking for. That's one reason why I've used the word preliminary for this study, is there's a recycling of the data and an evaluating from different vantage points to make sure we're not missing anything when we report out what the content looks like from a data analysis point of view.
Great, thanks. There are a couple of questions in here, one from Bob at NYPL. Can you outline what you think will be the path and direction of the NAFAN project? I do want to clarify that that OCLC is working on the research component of the NAFAN project, and there is a whole, you know, as Chela outlined at the beginning, there are several different components and spheres of this project, and one of them is kind of overall recommendations and a business project, and that's being run outside of OCLC Research. So I don't know, Chela, if you want to provide any more commentary on that, but that's not really part of this. That's not something that we were prepared to address as part of this webinar.
Sure. I can just speak generally about the kind of the arc of planned work. So this 2 years is it's a research in service of practice grant. So we're really trying to lay the groundwork for what a national finding aid or network might look like, both in technically and in terms of sustainability and in terms of governance structure, in terms of community support. So all of the facets of what a national aggregator might look like. And then there's going to have to be more work, not just to build it, but also to really, I think the governance and the sustainability assessment is a hugely important part of this. I'm putting a link into chat from the 2018 LSTA funded grant. Jody, who's with us today from Montana, worked on that grant. And wrote this great report sort of about the state of the current aggregation landscape. And sustainability is a real issue. A lot of the regional aggregators have aging infrastructure, have limited resources, and so we don't want to just propose to rebuild at a national level the way that we've been working at a regional level, and then bump up against these same sustainability issues in 10 years or 5 years or any number of years. So this is a long answer. This is a long way to say this phase is really about doing some definitional work, and there would be additional phases that would be about actually building something out, about finding an institutional home or creating the governance and sustainability structure. So this is just one step in the process. Does that answer your question, Bob?
We'll wait for Bob to get back. Sorry, I think I messed this up. This is a question from Alan Jones. What is the relationship between this initiative and ArchiveGrid, beside ArchiveGrid being a data source? And is this a product that OCLC is interested in developing? I will just say that ArchiveGrid is one of many existing aggregators, and I think that one thing that all of the aggregators have in common is really looking forward to the overall outcomes and recommendations from this project. So I think that most, if not all, of the aggregators are really in sort of a wait and see mode for the very fine work being done as part of this grant. So does anybody else from the project team have anything to add about that? Chela or Bruce? That sounds about right.
Yeah, I think, again, this is a sort of, in this definitional phase, we're going to have to wrestle with some of this stuff, and we don't have any definitive answers to the questions like that yet. Yeah.
Right. Let's see, we've got a comment from Jody. Upshot for everyone, we have an opportunity to transform the landscape, but have to avoid repeating the past, over focus on technology and not addressing scalability. Absolutely. And another comment, this user research will make a huge difference in making the figure. I'm super excited to see this work. Thank you, Jody. We are super excited to be, or the future. We are excited too. Here is a question from Noel. Just curious, the racial or gender or other elements were included when the individual, or when I think the question is about the pop-up survey and what kind of demographic data we got there. I hope I'm getting that question right, Noel. Leslie, you wanna take that one?
Yeah, we specifically included age, education, profession, and we do know the state where the individual resides. This was a sort of deliberate choice not to, I think, include race and gender because it hadn't really bared out anything that made a difference about who these people are in the past. But I will stand corrected if that is different. I feel like we also had previous research from online surveys conducted with other OCLC products that helped to inform which demographics made sense to ask. We did include gender as one of our demographic questions. I did not report on all of that stuff today. These are just some of the things that we have.
And this is Chayla, we asked about gender in the pop-up survey, but it wasn't one of the facets that we used to determine our clusters. So we are using it now that those clusters are determined. When we look at who we're inviting to do individual interviews, we are trying to get diversity across a number of those facets. So age, gender, geographic location, profession, depending on the cluster. We're thinking about what are the important demographics to make sure that we have represented across the people that we're inviting for interviews.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions. Oh, I'm wrong. There's another question. Cindy asks, I assume that the goal will be to get participation from all 50 states for the overall NAFAN project. For institutions that have no coverage, or I think what you maybe mean is for areas that are no coverage or defunct coverage, will there be a path for submission that does not require the existence of a regional aggregator? I know it is early days, but do you predict the final platform will intake EAD records?
Yeah, so we definitely hope that institutions from all 50 states would participate. That would be the goal. And I think we know that there will have to be a path that doesn't involve regional aggregators because there aren't regional aggregators for all 50 states. We're thinking a lot about what the final platform will accept. We didn't talk about it today, but we'll if folks are interested, we'll do another webinar in the future. We've also been doing the focus groups that Lynn mentioned with archival practitioners, and we've been hearing a lot from folks about all of the different forms that archival description takes in our institutions, and it's not just EAD. It's definitely MARC records, it's PDFs, it's Excel spreadsheets, it's and they're one of the other goals of this project is really to figure out how to provide a really low barrier of entry for all varieties of memory institutions and cultural heritage institutions. So we're really trying to find trying to think about how we can accept a broad range of record types that constitute archival description. I won't like promise exact formats right now, but we're definitely thinking beyond the EAD. We're also thinking about how the aggregator could provide a very basic interface for creating something like a DEX single level minimum record. Both Virginia Heritage and Online Archive of California provide something like that now. So for places that don't have structured data or don't have a way to publish on their own, they could have a tool to do that. So so we're thinking broadly about how to really facilitate national participation and how to facilitate participation across a variety of types of places that hold archival collections and that are differently resourced.
Thanks, Chayla. So here is another comment from Bob. Don't forget that many research libraries in Canada are also OCLC customers. Bob, we never forget about Canada. This is a project that is led by the California Digital Library, and it's also an IMLS grant, and the focus in the grant overall is on the United States and building an aggregation for the United States. So OCLC never forgets about our colleagues to the north, but we are working within the confines of this grant, which is being led by the California Digital Library. And Bob also adds that he would be interested in periodic updates or even just more sessions to make people more aware of the project. And I know that there are folks, I believe, from the California Digital Library. And Brian has on cue entered a link into chat. So where you can find out more information, sign up for regular updates that are from the project overall. So just to clarify, we're just presenting today on the research that we've done to date. And I'm certain that we'll be happy to do updates on our work as well as on overall project updates. Brian, I don't know if the project has plans to do an update that other people can attend that you know of, but you could maybe put that into chat. Here is a question from Karen Sayers. Are you thinking of adding the ability to record persistent identifiers such as Wikidata Q codes and VF references, links to those data sources, and enable, the creation of networked data? Does anybody want to take that? And again, this is just to reinforce, we are not driving the bus. We are doing the research on existing data. I don't know how this has come up, maybe in the technical subgroup, Bruce, or if anybody else wants to take a crack at that.
That is, I'm sorry for speaking there. The technical advisory group would be considering this idea. We're looking at it too in the quantitative analysis projects. I didn't give a preview or an overview of work so far on it, but of the 5 different quantitative studies we're looking at, one was to evaluate in the current corpus of data how controlled access points are. We look at content tags of various kinds, like for names of people, places, organizations. Are they already associated with identifiers in controlled vocabularies to get a sense of how much of that is present in the data, and when it isn't there, are there other clues that could be used for doing batch reconciliation to add those values? And once you have them, well, then what do you do? What do you do in a new discovery system for the NAFAN project to take advantage of those linkages and additional context from external sources? I think that's a rich area for exploration and great untapped potential. I think we'll find when we look at the current EAD data and the enrichments that have already been made to it from the participating institutions.
Thanks, Bruce. Let's see, I'm not seeing any other things. Bruce, Brian says that SNAC is a partner. SNAC, of course, makes use of identifiers there. Not seeing any other questions at the moment. Think I am going to take, since we have 2 minutes left in the hour and you probably have other meetings to go off to, I know I do, I'm going to go ahead and thank you all so much for joining us today and for engaging in a really great online virtual discussion. Really appreciate that. And also appreciate your attendance today. So we will be posting a recording of this webinar a little later on, hopefully this week, and we'll notify you by email when the recording is available. And I want to thank you once again for joining us today. And this concludes today's webinar. I hope you guys have a great day.